someone who has shame, who has the core belief is that they are bad. How do you either, reconstruct a different sense of self or draw their attention to another aspect of themselves which they don't perceive as bad? I know you're a great advocate of coherence therapy, so this might be a good segue into how we use memory reconsolidation and what might be adaptive, in the shame response or the shame perspective, and how we navigate someone out of that.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
So I'm working on, as part of the book, there's going to be a chapter that talks about kind of concepts, attitudes, and principles that guide the work. And the first section of the chapter is there are no shame and pride therapy techniques, which of course is not true. There's lots of different ways of working with shame and pride. But what is not true is that there's this method or technique, and I want you just to apply it as though it applies to all human beings, because that would be directly in contrast to how I think about being in relation to someone and helping the person be in relation to themselves. Right. Okay, but having said that, to speak to your question, I'm now talking about conscious pride, because there are dissociated forms which show up in relationship, but the person may not be consciously feeling shame or consciously feeling a problematic relationship to pride. So just to speak to the conscious form of it. So let's say the person is experiencing, I'm such a loser. I can't believe I did that again. There's no hope for me. I don't even know why you want to work with me. Certainly, I can't believe my wife still wants to live with me. I didn't want to get out of bed. What's the point? These would be forms of conscious expression of shame, for example, even though the person may never say the word, I feel ashamed of myself. They rarely say it, though occasionally they might. So one of the things that is important to understand about shame is it occludes one's being. So a metaphor would be it's like a solar eclipse, but the word is SOUL-AR. So it occludes the soul. So in order to work with shame, the person has to develop a conscious, mindful relationship to shame. Now that's easier said than done, because shame is my whole being.
Right.
So what you have to do over time is help them see that what just intruded, what just showed up, was shame.
Okay.
Or what just showed up from a more dissociated, this relates to relational trauma, is what I would call, and others have called, a shame state, which is short for a traumatic state that is held as shame, as opposed to a traumatic state that might be held as rage or might be held as fear/terror. So, but whether it's a traumatic state or just I'm feeling ashamed, the person has to have a way to have an aspect of themselves that is not 100% in the grips of shame, observing the shame experience. So one simple way to begin to do that is to name it.
Okay.
So as the person is talking, I might in time say, that sounds like shame, or that sounds like shame just showed up, which would be using a kind of narrative therapy metaphor.
Right.
Now, initially the person would say, no, that's me. But in time, you can, because of the way you're thinking about it and relating to them in relation to the shame, they come to name it too. Now, as soon as, it's not just the trick of naming it, what you're developing is what can be thought of as like a co-consciousness. There's the me experiencing shame, and there's the me observing the me experiencing shame. And and that is sort of the core principle of working with any trauma. You have to both be in the trauma and be able to observe it with the help of the therapist initially. And so that just creating that little wedge, that little psychological space between self and the experience of an occluded or shamed self is the first essential step toward working with shame. There's lots of other things you do after that, but without that, nothing can proceed.
Well, if you want to know more about the science of psychotherapy, come across to our website, thescienceofpsychotherapy.com, and our podcast of the same name, and learn more about the science of you.